Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I'm going to give you a quick rundown and answer a question that many of you may or honestly may not have had, which is what is a database? Now, before we get started, as always, please don't forget to like and subscribe to get a continuous feed of completely random content that hopefully you'll enjoy. But to go ahead and jump into things here. Now, what is a database? I'm going to provide a couple things in this video, including resources to learn more about SQL, which is the structured query language, essentially your way of interfacing or pulling information from a database. I'm also going to be giving you insight as to what type of jobs could you actually get? What salary could you expect to make as someone who may be a database developer or in a similar role? And then just really additional details and try to explain in further detail what the database is or looks like. This is going to be a very, very simplified version, as this is a lot of content to cover. If you're interested in learning more, please feel free to comment below and just kind of let me know what you would like to see my next video really be about. So jumping in, what is a database? Now, by definition, it comes by a couple of different phrases or terms, as it's a very, very dynamic and commonly discussed topic. But a database is essentially really a large amount of information stored in a computer system accessed via some language or pathway. So essentially, think of it as you'll have that common that picture in your head of a large data warehouse with a ton of machines and cables running all over the place. It's really just a large amount of information that could be stored. Does not always have to be a large amount of information, though. You could have a database with a single table. So the idea is really just in the real world. Databases, for example, let's just say companies like Walmart or Microsoft or Netflix, they have tons of information and they have to store it somewhere. So they have these massive file storage systems or servers, and they're putting all this information. And the best way I can kind of break it down would be to simplify it in terms of, let's just say, an Excel file as a visual representation. So let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, I want to give you a quick video link. So I'm going to provide a couple things in the description below. First is going to be the link to this Udemy page. This is not a course that I myself made, but it's a course that I've been taking, and I think it's a great way to learn more information. It's on Udemy. I have a video below as well, linking to really a video that I give you a breakdown of what Udemy is, but it's essentially your cheaper learning platform. So if we were to go to Udemy's homepage, we'll circle back to this page in a second, go up to the search bar and type in SQL. The first thing that is going to pop up, at least at the time of filming, is the Complete SQL Bootcamp 2020, go from 0 to hero. Now it's $129.99, but typically there's a promo code online you can use to get 95 to 90% off. That may sound like a crazy amount, but bear in mind we're talking 9 hours of content. I would definitely think it's worth it, but it's entirely up to you. Now you'll scroll through, you'll see all of the content that's available, user comments, etc., etc. But just wanted to go ahead and give you, this piece of information. Now next up, we will pull up PG Admin, which I'll be using to essentially give you a quick rundown of how you would use SQL, which is one of many flavors of SQL, to pull information from a database that I've created. I'll have a link in the description below to show you how to create that very, very simple database, which I now have. But we'll also be discussing, so really, really quickly, flavors of SQL. Consider database languages kind of like languages that we have now in the world. So you have, English, French, Spanish, etc. Again, this is probably not the best way to break it down, but it's the closest way I can think of. You're also going to have flavors of SQL. So we're going to have Oracle, MySQL, SQLite, Postgres, MySQL, Microsoft Access. So there's just, again, many, many different ways to essentially have this language structured or to essentially many different versions of this language. But again, just like with any language, using Spanish and English, you're trying to communicate a point to someone else, just like you're trying to pull this information from a database. This is just a random graphic online. You'll be able to find all of the various SQL flavors and more information on them, and really what's going to get you to what would be most important to learn to get you where you want to be, essentially. Now, from here, let's look at SQL jobs. Doing a quick Google search, you have SQL developers, SQL BI, which is typically business intelligence, people that are going to be pulling large amounts of information from a database and then doing any number of things on the analysis side. Maybe they're creating graphs and interpreting that information for executives, data analysts, things of that nature, but definitely no shortage of SQL jobs now. If we were to do a simple Google search for SQL developer salaries, the first couple, you'll notice we'll have a consultant for database developer at 60,000 plus, going up to 86. But a little bit more of a realistic interpretation, how much do SQL developers make? National average is $81,622 in the United States. Now, I've done technical recruiting and I have seen people clear well over the kind of base six-figure range as a SQL developer. Really just depends on what your skills are, what you know, and where you're applying them. Now, jumping into our example. I have a couple commands here as an example of using SQL to pull information or insert information into a database. Again, the link below has another video where I actually use these commands to create the database we'll be looking at today. It is a very, very simple database with few entries, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. Now, you'll see that we have created a table, inserted values, updated, deleted some values, and then inserted more values. So breaking this down to simplest form in this Excel file, we have, let's just say this is our database. And instead of book 1, we are going to call this YouTube underscore example, just like we have here. Now, if this is our database, you'll see that as we click on YouTube example, we have number, letter, random, column, and created. And then if we go to final, you'll see we have the same, but we also have some information here as well. Now, what if we were to, let's just say, extrapolate this information? And instead of 1 through 12, what if we have millions of entries? Now, if you're looking at this as an Excel file, you aren't going to want to scroll through every single entry to find a single individual. Or maybe there's more than one. So, for example, if you have a database of millions of employees and you want to celebrate the birthdays that occurred on the current date, you don't want to scroll through each individual date, risk missing some, and also risk wasting time on an employee's end for having to scroll through millions of entries in an Excel file. You would have a database created due to the sheer size, because it also would be difficult to manage a file of that size, but it also saves time in the long term returning information. So what would that look like? How are we using this? So if we were to use SQL, for example, SQL, again, being the structured query language, which is your way of interfacing with the database and pulling that information, just like if you were to use English to speak to another individual who also speaks English, and you were to say, "What is your name?" Then they would tell you that information. That's your way of interfacing with them. That's the simplest way I could break it down to you communicating with the database. Now here we'd be using pgadmin, which is kind of like your GUI or graphical user interface, to interface with this database a little bit more efficiently. But what I've done here is I've used a select statement to pull an asterisk or everything from a table named final. Now this is not affiliated with this Excel file. I just created the Excel file as a representation. But if we were to run this query, we would return all of the information in final. Now you'll notice I haven't put anything in the created table because I just didn't want to type everything out, and the current timestamp is going to change over time, so the time of filming it over the course of the video, the time would technically change. But in this statement, when we return it, we'll see that we have all of these with our secret little message. Please remember to like and subscribe to my channel for more content. Now, I created this database in a previous video, so you'll notice the timestamps are still the same from that video. Now, let's just say, for example's sake, this number is an employee name, or an employee number, and we want employee 7 because we know that it's their birthday. But what if there's millions of entries and we don't want to scroll through all of them, and maybe 7 is not always at the top? We could select everything from final where number is equal to 7. And then we would run this command, and you'll see that only that one column is returned, which is essentially the equivalent of selecting this column, or even just hypothetically deleting everything around it. Although you're not actually deleting it, you're simply just returning this value. And then providing that information in this window below. The content that was surrounding it was not deleted. You're simply just using this command to select it. So if we were to delete this and run it, everything is back. So as you can tell, essentially this database would be your representation of a large data set. And these could be stored on individual computers, servers, really anywhere data can be stored, because it can be stored as a file or series of files. And to break it down even further, realistically, the quote unquote cloud is really just a series of various storage devices in and of itself. So there is a lot more to this. But again, just to kind of give you a general breakdown, database developers are going to be the individuals that are helping to architect or create these databases. And the value brought to companies is you're storing massive amounts of information and pulling it, which, if you think every day that you go shop at a grocery store, likely all of the item numbers and descriptions and dates are stored in a database because there are millions of different types of food. You're talking to an employee. Their number and name and information is also probably in a database. You're using a computer and using programs where your information is probably stored in a database somewhere as well. So databases are everywhere and they're constantly being used. Now, if you have any questions, again, feel free to like and subscribe. Videos like this are a little bit difficult to make because it's hard to kind of consolidate all of this information into one bite-sized chunk. But essentially, you'd be using your database language to interface or pull and insert and update information in a database through some kind of median, essentially in this case pgadmin, to insert the information into this database. Now, simplifying it, your database is like an Excel file. It can have multiple workbooks. In a database, these would be tables. And within those workbooks, you can have millions and millions and millions of different entries. And it gives you the way to select this entry, which in Excel, you would either use VBA or some kind of coding essentially to essentially get to cell E97, as opposed to having to scroll through and read every single entry. And in a database, you're doing something very, very similar to pull that information as well. Now, again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment box below. If you like the content but want to see something different and more specific, let me know as well. As always, please feel free to check back into my channel, see some random content that I try to update regularly, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.